Okay, now we'll bring in a number of objects using the tween. So we're going to do a bit of a layout. So first of all, I'm going to go to the view menu and I'm going to show rulers. Once I've done that, I'm going to drag out a guide from the top ruler and place it along the top there, guide from the left ruler and place it here. I'm going to have three shapes, so either I can go to insert and box from the insert menu, or I can go to the insert element and box. A box appears, I'll just leave it the size it is, I'll take it off the stage and onto the grey area on the right, and all I will do is I'll just change its colour. I'll just make it a bluey colour there. And then next I'm going to just copy that, so either I can go to edit and copy, or I can just use a keyboard shortcut, copy and paste. I move that down. As a default it lines these up at 16 pixels and also aligns them up together, so I do that. Then I'm going to change the colour. I'll click on there and I'll make it a red colour. Then again I'm going to copy and move the other one, move it down to the bottom, and I'm going to change the colour of this, and I'll make this one yellow. Now down in the timeline it just says box, box, box in the main timeline. Now the yellow is highlighted and that's on the top, so I'll just call that yellow box. So I'll leave the word box and put yellow box, and then come down for the next one, which will be the red box, and finally I'll do the blue box. So they're all set up and named, so I know which one is which in the timeline. I'm going to start off and have them all coming in, and then we'll amend them and change them around. I'm going to move the playback head along to 12 on the timeline, and I can shift click each of those elements on the right there, and I can press the record button. Now I can click this and drag them all the way along to the left and butt them up on the guides that I've already done. Now you'll see in the timeline it's stretched out all those in the timeline to the 12 frame. Now if we look down at the bottom of the properties, it's done a property tween for each of those, so it's done them all. You can close those up, so it just has those, or you can expand them depending on what they are. So I'll just basically open them up there. Now what I can do is just play that, so I'll stop the record, take it back to the beginning and see what happens. So they all come in and come across. Obviously it's working quite slowly, just gives you an idea of how it works and dividing out. Right, now we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to have the blue come in, then the red, and then the yellow. Everything's all set up. They've been named in the timeline yellow, red and blue, as we did before. Guides have been set up to help us on the left and the top, and we're going to have them coming in, the three objects, so we're going to have it over 6 frames. So I move the playback head to frame 2, I press record, and I drag in my blue shape, and there it is. Then I'm going to drag in the red, and I want that to end at 4. So I drag in my red shape, and you would line it up. And then finally I move the playback head onto frame 6, and I drag in my last object, which is the yellow box. I'll take it back to the beginning and I'll play it and see what happens. Now they're coming in various times there, but really we want them to come in with blue. Once that stops, then the red. Once that stops, then the yellow. So we need to amend the objects in the timeline. So first up, I'm going to start with the red. So I click on the red in the timeline and I hover the mouse over frame 0 and I click there and I drag and have that starting at frame 2. Then I click on the yellow in the layer on the timeline and I drag that all the way along and I have that starting at 4. So if we see those blocks, we'll see that the blue goes from 0 to 2, then the red layer goes from 2 to 4, and finally the yellow layer goes to 4 to 6. If I take that back to the beginning, I'll see how that works now. So each of them come in separately. Okay, here's some more tweening. First up, I'll just change my background color. In the inspector, I will click on Scene Inspector and it'll have background, and I'll change that and I'll make it to say a bluey turquoisey color. Now I'm going to do a tween that's going to be a scale as well, so it's going to scale it and I'm going to do a record. So first up, I will get an image. I've got some skydivers here. Here they are. These are a PNG file, so it has a transparent background. I've dragged it. Now I'm going to hold the shift key and scale them down, and I'm going to place them up here, just away from the top there, and I'm going to have them sort of flying down and going right across to the bottom right, getting bigger and then disappearing. And I'm going to do that as a record. So it's going to be both a scale, so size and height, if you look down the properties, and also it's going to be the just a movement tween, which is origin, left and top, which will record for me. I've scaled it, I put it up at the top there. I'll now need to have it where I'm going to have it in the playback head. This denotes how fast it will run, so I'll just put it on 9, the playback head. I'll click the record button. Now what I'll do is I'll just drag that out and it tweens and drags out, and you can see the tween line. Also I'm going to hold shift and just drag it out and make them quite a little bit bigger, and then drag them down again, tug them out and drag it down so he just disappears off the side there. Run that back. Now if I play it, they come along, go all the way down, and then fly off to the bottom right. Okay, I've put an image on the stage, and I'm going to have it tweening opacity. So in the timeline, in the properties, it will have opacity, and I will click the add keyframe. I'll move the playback head along 2, and again I'll click another keyframe and put it there on the opacity for the timeline. Now I'll move it back, the playback head, to the first frame, and I'll click on the first keyframe there in frame 0, and I'll take my opacity down in the elements inspector, where it has opacity down to 0. Move my playback head along and you will see it will tween in and out. Now if I move my playback head to 4, frame 4, click the opacity again, then move it along to 6 and click again another keyframe in the opacity, and this time I'm going to click on that and then take the opacity down again. So you'll see what's happening there. We come along in the timeline, it comes up, it stays up 100%, then we get to frame 4, and then it fades back out again. Okay, this time we're going to put a rotation within a tween. I've got an object on my stage. I'll move the playback head along to frame 2. Now we need to have the properties to do a tween for rotation. As a default, you only have opacity, the origins and the sizes. So you need to click on the properties bar there, and you need to go down and you need to bring up rotation angle. Once we've got the rotation angle, we can click on the little button to add a keyframe at that position in the timeline on frame 2. I insert another keyframe in the rotation angle layer in the properties, and I can either move around my object all the way around to get to 360, or I can just type in 360 and place it in there. Now when I take my playback head back and I play, it'll get to frame 2, spin around and back to where it started from. Now I'm going to do the same with the y-axis. So I've set up a keyframe on the rotation angle layer in the properties, set up 2, one at frame 2, one at frame 4. On frame 4, I'm going to, in the metrics inspector, type in 360, press enter, and if I now run my movie, it will spin around. And then finally, I've done it on the x-axis.